showcase the beautiful, diverse cultures across Australia, including First Nations communities, migrant communities, international student communities, and people of colour. So we invited members of these communities to share with us a traditional dish from their culture, which we will get to learn how to cook today, as well as to share with us their personal stories. So before we proceed, I would firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we're meeting on today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to extend that to all the countries on which we find ourselves on today, wherever we're watching from, and to acknowledge any Torres Strait Islander and Aboriginal people watching with us today, and remind everyone that sovereignty was never ceded. So I'm going to present to you our 5th episode with Eshwar, which is really exciting for me because Eshwar also comes from Malaysia, which is where I myself was born and bred, so it's very close to my heart. But please don't forget to stay tuned after the episode because we will be joined by Esh and Miss Catalina for an exclusive interview, which I know is going to be fantastic. And if you want any more information or to catch up on any previous episodes that you might have missed, and to also see the recipe cards that will be released each week, make sure you go and check out thornharbour.org/The Bent Spoon. And don't forget to comment in the comment section below on Facebook or on YouTube, wherever you're watching from, and we will see you after the episode. See you soon.
Talo Falava, Womajika, and welcome to The Bent Spoon, brought to you by Thorn Harbour Health. Now, food plays a really important part in our culture traditions. Food can bring you comfort, it can bring people together, and it can definitely tell a story. Now, food is a universal love language where we get to share the rest of the world our culture. My name is Miss Catalina, and I'm your host.
My name is Eshwar, you can call me Ash, and I moved here 10 years ago. I call Australia home now.
Welcome, Eshwar.
Thank you.
All right, so tell me, what have we got here?
This dish is called dal tarka. It's
Dal
tarka.
Dal tarka.
So it's basically what it means is that it's tempered lentils.
Oh, okay. Nice, lentils. And what are the ingredients that you need to make this beautiful dish?
Okay, perfect. So the first thing that you've got to do before you do this dish is that you got to get chana dal, which you can get it at most grocery stores, Woolies, Coles.
Yeah. Which is this one here?
Which is this one here.
Yeah.
So this dal, this lentil, basically, it takes a long time to cook. So you gotta soak it for at least 24 hours.
Okay. The day before.
The day before.
Yeah.
And if you do soak it, then it cooks within an hour. But if you don't soak it, it's gonna take 5 hours.
Really? That long?
Yep.
Wow. I'd rather order KFC. No. And what are the other ingredients? All these beautiful ingredients that you've got here.
All right. So for the dal, I've got lentils that I've soaked for 24 hours. I've got salt.
Salt. Can you use any salt?
You can use any salt, but if you want to be health conscious, you can use Himalayan salt as well.
Yeah.
We've got onions, tomatoes, green chili. We've got mint.
With this green chili, is that hot?
It's actually not hot.
Oh.
It's not hot at all. It's really mild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the only green chili hot here.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course.
Okay. And this one here?
We've got mint,
Mint.
we've got curry leaves.
Curry leaves. Where do you get curry leaves from?
Actually, you can get I got all these ingredients, not from an Indian store.
Oh,
You can get them all in your regular supermarket.
okay.
Yeah.
Even the curry leaves?
Even the curry leaves.
Okay.
Um,
Do you get them fresh like that?
you get them fresh.
I don't think I've ever used curry leaves. Oh, I have.
You have?
Because in a box.
It's a quite a staple ingredient in Indian
Yeah.
food. Mainly, I would say South Indian dishes.
Yeah.
But we've always used that ingredient in our cooking in the family.
Yeah.
Um,
And these beautiful spices.
the spices,
Ooh,
of
that's
course.
nice.
Spices are important.
And what's this one?
So that's chili powder.
Chili powder.
You can go for medium heat or low heat. Doesn't really matter.
Okay.
This is turmeric.
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 This is really good for you, apparently.
This is absolutely good for you.
Yes. Is it good for memory?
It's actually an antibacterial,
okay.
antiviral. It's got anti-inflammatory properties. And that's the interesting thing about Indian food as well. The origin of Indian food is in Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is the science of well-being and longevity in Indian culture. So all these spices have health benefits.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. And this one?
And that is garam masala.
Oh, I love that. That's
course.
the kind of like the foundation of curry, isn't it?
It is the foundation of
you
curries.
can't really make curry without this.
You can't.
Yes.
Basically, garam masalas would be one of the staple Indian ingredients that you would have in every Indian kitchen. It's actually a mixture of many different spices, all 5 different spices, all ground together in one little powder.
Oh, wow.
Powder form, yeah. So this is anise.
Star anise, I think it
anise,
is. Yeah. I only found out last week what that was called. Yeah.
We've got star anise, we've got cumin seeds, we've got cloves, and we've got cinnamon.
Cinnamon? Oh, is that like to balance it out or something?
It gives a beautiful scent and a sweetness to the dal. So my family, they are 5th or 6th generation Indians. They migrated to what we used to call Malaya back then in the late 1800s. And interesting journey. They were spices and textile merchants, and they set up one of the first spice mills in Kuala Lumpur. So cooking has always been an essential part in our family, because as I said, we traded with spices, and for us spices are magic. It speaks about our family roots. Growing up in Malaysia, discovering my queer identity was such a confusing thing, because Malaysia is predominantly a Muslim country, and unfortunately it was also very deeply homophobic. My family was not blatantly homophobic, but there was no space for me to safely come out either. So in 2010, I was still in Malaysia. I was dating my ex-partner back then, and we're both from Indian background, Malaysian Indian background, and one day his mum found out that her son's dating another man, and shit hit the fan basically. Things just went downhill after that. We'll start cooking. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
So we'll put this to the side. And
So what we will do
what's the
is...
first step that we need to do?
Okay, so what we will do is we'll put the water to boil.
Okay, water
That's the
to
first
boil.
thing that we would
Do you
do.
need more water?
I would say so. We'll pour the whole thing in.
Okay.
I think it might take maybe about 3 large glasses of water. So we don't want the gravy to be too watery. So I think that should be fine.
That's enough?
I think that should be fine. So what we'll do now is we'll increase the
Heat.
Perfect. You've already done that. Now we pop the lentils in the boiling water.
Like so. Okay. That's making noises.
Excellent.
And how long would this need to boil for?
So that probably will take about half an hour. If it's well soaked,
Yeah.
half an hour, and then that should be it.
Okay.
So in the meantime, what I would like to do, Kate, is
Yes.
if you can help me chop up one tomato.
Yes. Okay. Just one?
Tiny chop, chop, chop.
Oh, really? Okay. Do you keep these things here?
I do.
Oh, you
I
do?
Yeah, yeah.
Just any way I feel like?
Any way you feel like. So you can just cube it as well.
Okay.
All right. Now, while you do that, what
Yes.
I'm going to do is I'm going to add maybe about 1 teaspoon of turmeric.
1 teaspoon. Okay.
And the interesting thing about this dish is that no matter which part of the diaspora is, let's just say I'm from Malaysia, we still cook the same dish. And I
Yeah.
know some of my Indian friends from South Africa and Fiji and UK and
Yeah.
Mauritius and Maldives, wherever Indian migrants went, they've always carried that dish with them. So we add the tomatoes in there, the chopped tomatoes in the boiling pot of lentils and turmeric. I need to add
Oh, the...
maybe a teaspoon of salt.
Okay.
We do use a little bit of salt.
Yeah.
I need
And what's that one?
garlic, minced garlic. I like a lot of garlic.
And would this be your favorite dish, or do you have a favorite dish?
This would be my favorite dish.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a staple dish that's cooked in my family,
Okay.
whether it's daily or whether it's festival.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 tablespoons of minced garlic in there,
Uh-huh.
and I would add 2 tablespoons of minced ginger. So ginger and garlic is
Yeah.
important.
Beautiful.
So we've got salt, chopped tomatoes, turmeric,
Yeah.
minced garlic, minced ginger, all boiling in the pot. Now
Okay.
it's got to really simmer, because I feel like, and this is what my grandmother told me, with turmeric,
Yeah.
you gotta really boil the turmeric,
Okay.
or else you get a bitter taste.
Yeah.
Turmeric is good, but Indian food is all about layering.
Yeah.
So you gotta get the layering right.
Yeah.
And I notice a lot of people who try to cook Indian food, they tend to chuck all the ingredients
All
all at
together.
one go.
Yeah.
And it gets, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not how it should be. I like red onions because it gives an extra zing. This is where it will get interesting.
Yeah.
Because once the lentils are almost cooked,
Yeah.
you move the pot, and then we start the tempering of the spices.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I think it came to a point where there were some harsh decisions that we had to make, because the family was starting to get very agitated. There were conversations around forced marriages and potential suicide if we did not marry and live normal heterosexual lives. So we had to come to the hard decision of packing our bags and leaving. And we both arrived here together in Australia in 2010. We arrived in Adelaide hoping that we've left everything behind and we're going to start a new life here together. It was a bit of a fantasy now looking back. Of course, we all want the best. We all want to strive for good things, greener pastures. We eventually realized that it wasn't really easy for us to assimilate as what we assumed. It was quite difficult. It took a long time before we both got there, and unfortunately by that time it took a huge toll on our relationship and we split up. Now looking back, I realized those were all barriers that we didn't quite think of when we came here, because the dream and the goal and the love and the idea of wanting to be together in a free country sort of clouded our eyes from reality. Initially, when I first came here, I realized there was invisible barriers. I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't realize why was it so difficult for me to get a job.
I speak perfect English. You know, my personality is great. What's wrong with me? And I would put out 150 applications and I wouldn't get one reply. And I would, my ex-partner and I will go to the club and we'll be at the bar and we would be like, oh, this must be like Malaysia, everyone should be friendly. And we will be hanging out there and try to make friends, but no one would want to come and talk to us. And eventually I realized, shit, this is pretty much the same thing as what we went through in Malaysia as well. There's this structural issues here. There's definitely some form of racism or othering that's going on here. So I guess once I understood that, it wasn't a complete shock because it was something that I had already gone through in Malaysia in some form or another. It's not something that I needed to learn again because it's in my bones. Growing up second-class citizen in Malaysia, having to go through barriers because of my name and because of my skin color and my race is just another thing that I'm going to go through here. So I came to terms with that. I changed my name from Ishwar to Ash in my resume. Got a job. To be honest with you, both is part of my identity, I would say. Where I came from in Malaysia and where I live right now, here, is both important to me.
I
So
think
what's
we're
next?
almost done.
Almost done.
So,
this is what I prepared earlier.
okay, so what I need now
Yeah.
is I'm gonna move this aside,
Okay.
let that sit.
Tell me what you need, what you need.
I need a
What
pan.
you need.
I need a pan.
You need a pad. Here's one I prepared earlier.
Thank you. All right, so this is the interesting part.
Oh, this is a part that I'm really excited about.
This is the part. This is where the magic happens. Oil. I do use a lot of oil because the dal, the lentils, it soaks up quite a bit of oil. So
And how much oil is that? Well, that's a lot of oil.
that's okay. That's not too bad.
Oh, okay.
That's not too
I
bad.
always thought you would use a little bit of oil, but
Oh
you need
God, no! Not
no.
Indian cooking.
And then you're going to add this.
And then you add that. So this is clarified butter, ghee.
I'll make
You can
that
get it at
inside.
any Indian shop. All right.
Okay. So you add that, and then once you got to wait till that's quite hot.
Heats up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you get that smell? The smell of the butter and the
Yeah,
oil.
I can smell the butter. I can't smell the oil. I don't know what else I can smell. My hunger pains.
I can hear your stomach groaning.
I know. It's like feed me, feed me, feed me. And do you fry these just all together or
Yeah.
separately? Or all together?
No, you're right. Yeah, I do fry them separately because the cumin tends to burn. So I usually would put the star anise, the cloves and the cinnamon because they all tend to sort of fry at the same heat. All right, so cinnamon. Now we add, so we've got to move really quick now. Yeah, now we add the star anise. You see the smell?
Yeah, I can smell them. Yeah, I love star anise.
It's coming alive now.
Stew. Yes, that's beautiful.
It's coming alive now. Now you add.
And how long do you wait till you add the next?
Let it become a bit golden,
Oh, okay.
but don't burn it.
Yeah, okay. So
Do you
that-
see the layering of the
Yeah.
cinnamon and the star anise and the cloves? You can
Yeah.
It's all not moving together. Now we add the
Yeah.
cumin. Now we've got to move. Can I have?
Yeah. Do you want this?
I'll have the curry leaves.
Curry leaves. Ooh. I've never
Okay.
seen curry leaves before.
You've never
like
seen
this
curry leaves before, so you don't have to put the whole
Oh, this
stalk.
smells yum.
There you go. All right,
Occupational health and safety. Stand by.
mint leaves.
Wow. That looks amazing.
Amazing, it is. Now, I'm going to add the onions. If you can help me chop the green chili thinly.
So how do I just cut it this way?
You slice
That
it
way.
really thin.
Oh, okay.
That way is good. That way is good. Yep, that's how my
This
mom
way?
does it. Yep.
I just learned that the other day.
Perfect. That's perfect.
Okay. And I know people were looking at me thinking, oh wow, look how she's chopping. She's gonna chop off her fingers.
Yes. So you gotta wait until the. You don't want to caramelize the onion.
Yeah.
But it just gotta wilt.
And then when this goes in, that even makes it,
That will just.
Yeah.
That will just marry the whole thing.
yeah. And then divorce later.
And then you divorce it later. You devour it later here.
Do you want me to chop both of them?
I think one's fine.
One's
I think one's fine. Because we are in Australia after all, you know. We've got to watch the heat.
How long
Okay.
would you cook that for?
Um,
Before you put the tomatoes in?
until the onion wilts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see the spices are not burning because we've added the onions. Now we add the tomatoes.
Okay.
We turn up the heat.
So with this dish here, is this a dish that's well known in Malaysia, like, or because it's an Indian dish as well, isn't it?
It's an Indian
Oh,
dish.
it's an Indian dish.
It's an Indian dish,
Yeah.
but because Malaysia's a very multicultural country.
Yes.
3 major races: Malay, Chinese, and Indian, and
Yeah.
pretty much most Malaysian food is a mixture of all 3 different food. Chinese food,
okay.
Malaysian food, and Indian food. So usually dal is something that most people would have with roti
Yeah,
for breakfast in the morning in Malaysia.
love roti.
Yep. Roti is beautiful. Yeah.
Yum.
Now, I'm going to keep all my powders here
Together? Yeah.
together. Maybe a teaspoon of garam masala,
Yes, my favorite.
your favorite. A teaspoon of red chili powder.
But I was told you need to fry this first. Probably not for this dish.
That's already powdered, so that's fine.
I can smell that.
Can you
That
smell
is
that?
yum.
Red chili powder.
Wow, I feel like I'm at home.
I tend to
Well,
go
I never
hard
know.
on that
This is
one.
my home. My temporary home.
You should come over to my place and have some food one day.
Yeah, I should come there every day.
Every day. And cumin. Cumin powder. 3 most important ingredients.
Yes.
Give it a good, let it fry. Now, I'm gonna get you to throw that green chili in there.
Okay. Oh yes, the one that I chopped up. There we go. Do you the seeds? Do you throw them out?
Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't really matter?
Doesn't really matter. So we move the pot of lentils
Yeah.
back onto heat.
Okay.
And now, I'm gonna stir this.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stir this for now.
Looks amazing.
It does, doesn't it?
Oh my God.
The smell. the
Yes.
smell. Now I'm just going to lower the heat to maybe medium,
Yeah.
not high, so that it doesn't burn. Cover this,
Yes.
and we'll come back in 10 minutes.
Oh, beautiful. I can't wait.
I would not change a thing with all those experiences that I've gone through. I think it's made me who I am. I think I'm definitely a resilient person, and I know a lot of my friends say that. I don't really like to, apart from this conversation that we're having right now, I generally don't really like to talk about all the difficult things that I've gone through, because it then becomes like a pity party, a soppy story, and that's not me. I think strength, I want to speak about strength. I'd like to focus on the positives. I think despite all the difficulties, and we all have difficult stories as queer people, we all have our own journeys, and at some point all that adds up to our resilience to keep going. And I think this country has definitely taught me a lot of that, taught me different aspects of myself that I wasn't even aware of. If I didn't come here, I wouldn't have experienced all those things, and I wouldn't change a thing about that. That's what I would like to see here in Australia. Not just tick boxes and hire us because we are people of color. Include our thinking as well, because there's a lot of richness there. There's a lot of history there. There's a lot of diversity there. I think any culture that thinks one way is not rich. So to all those people who are listening to this, never ever think that you're any lesser than anyone else. You're not a second-class citizen. You're rich, you have history, you're diverse, and you're contributing to the fabric of the society. So be proud of who you are and be resilient. So today's food, dal tarka, is one of my favorite food. My grandmother used to cook it for me, and we usually eat it with roti, puri, or rice. Brings back a lot of memories, and I was actually quite surprised that I got all the ingredients at Coles today. I didn't actually go to an Indian food store, which is a beautiful thing, because that means Australia is diverse. I can get all my Indian food ingredient at a mainstream supermarket. And that was not even actually possible probably 10 years ago when I first came here. So it's changing rapidly. Australia is changing rapidly, and food is one of those cultural things that it is so therapeutic. It's got so much history, and we like to share all that stuff. And I would like to see more of that happening in the future. More people trying different sorts of cultural food. Change it, tweak it, make it your own, because that's what Australia is all about. So it looks like it's almost ready.
Oh, looks, it smells ready. Beautiful. And do you have
Gorgeous.
anything to garnish with that, or do you just have it like that?
Yes, please. So if you could finely chop up some coriander.
Of course. Look at me. I think I know what I'm doing.
Perfect. So we've got saffron rice and garlic naan.
And here's something
wrong
I've
with that.
prepared earlier. No, I haven't.
Thank you. So we've got saffron rice, garlic naan.
And what is this one here?
That's garlic naan.
Oh, garlic naan. Yum.
And here's the
Look at that.
dal. Look at
That is
that.
delicious. And do you leave the cinnamon thing in there?
Well, I like it.
Yeah?
I like
Do you
it.
eat
think,
it?
I think I don't eat it,
Okay.
but I think the more the spices stay in there,
Yeah.
the more it releases the flavor. And a sprinkle of coriander,
of my beautiful well-chopped coriander.
and we're done.
Oh wow, it smells amazing. Oh wow.
So, if this is a vegetarian version, but if you want to add meat in it,
Which I would.
which you could add
just
lamb
close this so you
into
don't-
it.
Don't sue me.
You can add chicken into it.
Yeah.
You can do all sorts of things with it.
Beautiful. Wow, Ishwa. It's come to the end. I want to say thank you so much for coming by to the Bent Spoon, and hopefully we get to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Aw.
Thank you for having me at the what am I saying?
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Thank you for having me on the Bent TV today. Bent TV. Why can't I think of the last word? I'll do it again until it feels all right. I hope you had a great time watching me cook my favorite dish today. Thanks for having me on the Bent Spoon. For more information on the recipe, you can check it out at the Thorn Harbour Health website. Thanks for having me.
All right, welcome, Miss Catalina.
Thank you, Jessie.
Welcome, Ash. Say hello to our audience. How did it feel watching that episode for the first time?
Oh my goodness. I loved it. Like, I couldn't remember anything. And when I was watching it, I was like, wow, is that what happened? We had the best time ever.
Totally. What about you, Ash?
Yeah.
We did. Because I think I was so zoned out and I was so sort of into what I was doing that I knew Catalina and I had a great time, but it was just picking out all those little bits. That was just was actually quite fun to watch because I was a bit self-conscious. I thought, oh shit, I'm gonna, but yeah, for the first
No,
time.
you
Wow.
were amazing.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
it. I really love it. And I love capturing this moment of seeing like the reaction from the both of you when you've just watched it, because it's an amazing production. And like, I really want to cook some curry now. So I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, no, actually, you were beautiful on there. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to mention, sorry, the reason why I'm wearing sunnies, because I have a swollen eye. My left eye is swollen.
Oh,
See?
You look all kinds of diva, so I love it.
So I've
You've
got to
been-
put some earrings on.
You've been saying things you shouldn't be saying, Catalina.
Yeah.
Yes, I see too much.
Indeed. So, Ash, what was your favorite part of the whole filming process, and the whole Ben Spoon journey so far for you?
I think just looking at it objectively, I think I've never had an opportunity like that before to speak about culture and sexual identity and just connecting with other people who come from diverse cultures and background. And I think there was just a different vibe in that space, and that's it's special.
Yeah.
And then how do you feel now that you're looking back and watching the episode, like now that you've watched it on your own? Especially the interview, but the part that you talk about, what do you feel?
It brought back.
Because I tell you, I do feel really empowered and inspired by you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's one of those things, you just keep moving on with your life. You just keep chugging on with your life and you don't remember what you say. And then when you watch a recording like that and you go, wow. Because there was something about the way it was all set up where it was not timed, it was not structured, there was no pressure. So therefore, all the things that you hold on the inside, it just sort of comes out as a story. And I think that's the beautiful part with people of color, but particularly queer people of color. We don't get to story our lives. And there was a lot of storying in there, wasn't there? There was a lot of sharing and storying, and no one was sort of timing and chop. Now we got to do this at this time. And I think it all started to flow and it all started to come out. And then now looking back, I thought it wouldn't make sense, but it makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
And you have such an empowering story, and it's amazing that you can share it. And it's really courageous. And yeah, I'm so proud of you both. And I'm glad you feel that way. Like you said, there was a lot of story, right? Like the range of things that you talked about, from like your families being spice merchants and like a spice mill, and then being queer in Malaysia, and then, coming over here and people not talking to you in the club, and like it just covers all the like these facets of just an entire human being. Yeah, that's awesome. I did actually, let's start with the family. You said that they were trading merchants, and to them spices though were not just food, but it's also like a little bit of magic. Do you want to tell us a bit more about the family and like what else spices are used for other than just cooking?
Yeah, absolutely. Spices, the thing with spices is that I don't know where to begin or where to end, because it's always been there. It's only in context like this is when I start thinking about like, wow, yeah, it's one of those things that you take it for granted because it's always been there. It's a simple thing as, when there's a childbirth in the family, spices are used in rituals, whether it's bathing the baby in turmeric,
Wow.
and saffron water and anointing them with mustard seed oil, right up to wedding ceremonies, right up to even death ceremonies where scented spices are used to bathe the body of the deceased and during cremation.
Wow.
It really is part of the culture's magic, isn't it?
Definitely part of the culture's magic because and yeah, the spices have been used in Indian culture for God knows for how long. So it's hard to, yeah, it's one of those things that it's just always been there and you just take it for granted. It's just that when you look back and you go, oh wow, actually it's everywhere.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
In the one of the interviews that you're doing, you mentioned about being queer in Malaysia. Are you able to tell us more about what was it like being queer and living in Malaysia?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It's still a little bit difficult talking about that being queer in Malaysia. It was hard growing up. It's a deeply homophobic country, and hate crimes were quite often happening, but it was never publicized or talked about. You would only hear among your own circle of friends that someone got bashed up or someone got murdered, and it's usually sort of covered up as something else, like an accident. And I've lost a few friends because of this. And that's, you know, the anti-queer homophobic laws are deeply rooted in the state and the religious laws as well. Queer clubs were constantly being raided, queer people publicly named and shamed. So it was not exactly a fun place to grow up in. It's just don't ask, don't tell.
Wow.
You know, as you know, Ash, I'm from Malaysia as well, but I am from Kota Kinabalu in Sabah, which is East Malaysia. And I wonder, from hearing what you say, like the way that things go down in East Malaysia and West Malaysia, I would say are quite different, what you say. And I think, which is interesting considering it's the same country, but I mean, obviously, you know, kind of similarities, but I feel like from what I've heard and what I know, maybe because Kuala Lumpur is the capital or something like that, it is slightly different, and maybe we're more like a country town by like the islands and stuff, and more tourism and whatnot. But I guess there is this thing about Sharia law, isn't it? And that is the Muslim law that is effective for certain groups of people. Am I right? Which is Bumiputra Muslims there, and it's like the how do we explain it? It's the religious law.
Yeah,
Take precedent over.
It's a religious law, but it's not a law that is imposed on everybody. But that's where it gets tricky because the line gets grayed, because the law also influences the way people think.
Of course.
And if the dominant culture thinks like that, then of course discrimination and oppression is going to happen in some form, in some way. So although it directly did not impact us lawfully, but because the law was present, it created an entire culture that was homophobic, which further pushed the LGBTIQ community underground and not be visible. So a lot of and between East Malaysia and West Malaysia as well, of course, you know, the political parties play a huge role as well. East Malaysia is generally a lot more liberal, whereas West Malaysia is ruled by I would say, quite a conservative political party. And of course, this was, I would say, the reason why homophobia or queerphobia in Malaysia actually got really bad was at the point when the Mahathir and the Anwar Ibrahim issue became publicized, and how sodomy was openly named and shamed. And that was when the religious institution took that opportunity to basically take it to another level. Prior to that, it was more like you would hear, don't ask, don't tell, don't shove it in my face. As long as you don't shove it in my face, it's okay.
For those who don't know, it was just it was quite a publicized world event, right? And it was just some of the I guess our political leaders were involved or accused of homosexual acts, which resulted in severe public repercussions,
scrutiny. It basically gave institutions the power to enact anti-queer behavior and laws.
Wow. And so with all that happening, is there like a community for queer people to be part of, like an LGBT group or a safe place, safe space for the community to be, to go to?
Well, I did have a small community back home, but this was towards the end before I left, because I myself was not publicly out in the early years, and I didn't make any friends with queer people because I had the fear of being caught in public. Because people are constantly watching. It's a very close-knit community. It's a huge city, but almost everybody knows everybody. So you can't really go anywhere without somebody going, "Oh, you're so and so son, right?" Or you're, I know your great grandfather,
Oh my goodness, I know. And going in Malaysia, like, I'm not Jessie, I'm Francis Wong's daughter.
So you know that, yeah. And it's you just get caught up in that. So I never really. It was difficult. It was difficult. I was yearning to be part of a community, but then at the same time, I also had fear of being caught. And then things started to change eventually when I was started being introduced to queer people through ex-partners. And that was when I realized, that was actually quite a thriving hidden community. But it also came with a price, because there was a lot of outing that was happening out of spite from within the community.
Really?
Yeah. So
not that loyalty with each other.
I wouldn't say it's loyalty. I think it was more because, once you're an oppressed group, you're already at risk. So, and that's how oppressed groups sort of turn on each other.
Wow.
That's how the system works. So if, let's just say, someone doesn't really like you, they could just sort of, out you to your mom or your dad or your family, and there's huge repercussions to that. And it's because of the repercussion. So it wasn't easy. It was, there was, and I'm not the only person who went through that. There was risk outside the LGBT community, and there was also risk from within the LGBT community, because there was no law or rights that protected us. You can't seek for justice. There was a couple of straight allies that I had, but there was just constant anxiety and ridicule everywhere. I lived a big chunk of my life basically reading about queer identities and queer theories, but almost never living it.
Wow. Wow, there's it's sad that, I don't know, but like today, like in year 2020, is there much to happen, or is there any protection for the queer community to Malaysia at all? Or any improvements or?
You know, I haven't been home, like I haven't lived in Malaysia since I was 17, so that was quite a while ago.
Oh,
Goodness
it's not
me.
that while ago, Jessie.
More than a decade.
You're still young.
I'm younger than I look. No, sorry, I'm older than I look. But from what I know is there is actually an HIV organization in based in KL, and they actually had an HIV conference there, and through that there has been some advocacy through the HIV lens, as opposed to directly. Am I right, Ash? You might not know a bit more about that. And there are certain political people high up that are very supportive of that, but it comes through an HIV lens. And, I guess that's better than nothing, right? Like, especially to start with. But as far as that goes, I think it's quite, what's the word, forward in that field.
For HIV.
Mm.
Is it because it's a
Rate could be
mixture
quite
of...
high,
It's a catch-22, that one.
Okay.
That's the best we could do in Malaysia.
Yeah.
We can't talk about sexuality, so the narrative around that is that you almost have to create some sort of a pity party, we are the deviants and HIV is affecting our community, so please government pity us and give us a little bit of money through HIV. So you just don't talk about the sexuality or the mental health or any of that stuff. You just talk about HIV. HIV is a huge taboo subject in Malaysia. Drug use is a huge taboo subject in Malaysia. So the government does not do that sort of, they don't fund NGOs to do harm reduction work in that way. So you always have to find ways to sort of get the funding through another avenue and then channel it to another avenue. And you just got to work around the system. You got to find loopholes in the system, because I used to work at the Malaysian AIDS Council as well.
Right.
And yeah, and that's where I had my first glimpse of working for it was not publicized as a queer org, but it was run by queer people. And it was probably the only place where I felt safe to come out. So, and I was introduced to how badly the system was, and how much we have to work around the system to get what we needed to get.
Yeah. Speaking of coming out, did you actually have much of a coming out process in terms of your family or with friends and stuff? And what was that like?
That's a very interesting question, Jessie, because I have been sitting on that word for a long time in my life. Coming out is a very fascinating sort of, it's not a word, what is it? Is it?
Term.
It's a term, yeah?
Western.
Yeah. It's a term, yeah, exactly. So growing up watching what was happening in the West with the LGBTIQ rights movement and all that, the word coming out was, I was like, yeah, coming out, we gotta come out, it's the right thing to do. It's how things should be. But the reality was, contextually, from where I come from, I don't agree with that, because there's a lot of risk that comes with coming out. See, I have a very different view of that term, because it's a Western term that suits the geo-socio-political context of the West. See, if you come out when you know that there is always somewhere safe for you to go and your rights would be protected by the state, then it's okay. How do you come out when from within your family unit right up to the country's institutional setting that is deeply discriminatory and homophobic. Where do you go? So,
Right.
and also, I didn't feel like it was a closet for me to come out from. It was more like a cage. It was more like a prison without an exit.
Mm.
And in this context, it was safer to just stay in the cage because there were hyenas out there that was waiting to rip you apart.
Yeah.
Wow. I actually never thought of, because a lot of my friends, I have one of my best friends is, she's stuck in Malaysia. I mean, she's from there. But so I've learned a lot about Malaysia, but I never knew this side of Malaysia. It was never talked about, so I had no idea. I thought that, queer people were, I mean, I knew the trans side of it. If you're doing certain things, you get arrested, they cut your hair off. But I just didn't realize that it affected the whole queer community. I just thought it was just the trans that
It's so
would get
layered.
arrested.
Yeah, it's so layered, isn't it? Because there's the religious part, then there's the cultural part, and then it's like, okay, is it Malay culture or is it Indian culture, Chinese culture, and then there's the, where you are in Malaysia. So I think it's so varied. And I suppose, yeah, so it's you're right. But I guess I'm interested to know, what do you think, what was the coming out process for you? And if there wasn't a coming out process, what was your equivalent? I think you might have mentioned it in your on the episode about how, there was like a threat of the forced marriages and stuff, and your family were not happy and they were not supportive, which must have been really difficult. But what about that? Are forced marriages common in the queer community as a solution or something?
Forced marriages are quite common in Malaysia, and they can happen in many ways. So you see, when we use the word forced, I think even that word is very binary, because no one literally forces you to get married, right? But there are systems around you that coerces you to do that. So we need to look at the context of the word that we use as well, because people will say, oh, but no one forced you. No one put a knife on your throat and said you should get married.
Yeah.
But you've got your whole society, your family shaming you, and you are put in a situation where you risk of losing everything, including your loved ones and your support, and you're on your own. So what do you do?
Yeah.
You're coerced to do that, to survive. And that's what, for me, in the queer community in Malaysia, I would look at the word forced, because it's not always clear
Or blatant.
how it's done. It's not always, because there's the term that is used. There's a background story behind the word forced. But then again, at the same time as well, I don't want to sort of sit here and bag my culture or bag my the country that I come from, because ultimately behind all that is the story of colonization. Is the story of how the British brought their archaic homophobic laws and imposed it on Asia, and it created generations of people who believed that was wrong. Because I know for a fact that in Southeast Asia or in Malaysia, in traditional Malay culture, LGBT identities were accepted, celebrated. They were seen as divine beings. So was in India too. So I also feel like it's a bit unfair to just say, oh, your culture is this and your culture is that, your culture is horrible, and that's usually the kind of sort of thinking that I get from people here, especially from white LGBT community. But they also fail to realize that actually there's a story behind that story.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about the storying process, because it's not just one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so behind that process of colonization that brought in those laws and imposed that on people, behind that, the Indian culture, which goes back, one of the oldest cultures in the world, you'd say, I think you mentioned it, it was the divinity, the trans or that non-binary was actually closer to the divine. And it's in your stories and stuff. And that's kind of something that you said brought you a lot of connection and hope in your understanding of yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. That was the part where I had to do a lot of unpicking and unpacking. Lots of, it's a lifelong journey of unpicking and unpacking about this sexuality, culture, identity, faith, spirituality. And at one point in my life, I was quite prepared to just ditch everything and just adopt a Western narrative of the G and identify myself as being gay. But I realized it didn't really suit my soul, I would say.
Because you're so much more than just your sexual identity, though.
So much more, absolutely. Because there's always the duality as well in the culture. Like, for example, in the culture that I grew up in, we had images of deities, Hindu deities, that were alpha masculine, alpha feminine, and deities that would transition from male to female, from female to male. There were intersex deities. There were deities that had relationships with the same sex. And there was that whole smorgasbord of the pantheon of the gods and the goddesses. So sexuality was always celebrated and present in the Indian community, in the Hindu faith, basically. And there's still a lot of evidence left behind in temple carvings to cultural practices. The Hijra community in India is one of the few remaining LGBTIQ community. I mean, I wouldn't use the word transgender on them because it's a completely different context, but it's a femme identity that was for thousands of years seen as divine.
Hijra, was it?
The Hijra community. So that was something that I had a conflict with the Western construct of LGBTIQ, which was very sexualized. The word homosexual didn't quite fit with me because I'm more than just a sexual being with my queerness.
Yeah.
So I had to do a lot of questioning and unpacking and just unpacking and unpacking and unpacking. And finally I realized, yeah, you know what? This is who I am. I'm not just going to walk through an LGBTIQ supermarket and pick an acronym that that closely resembles me. I'm going to go back to my culture. I'm going to go back to the roots of my identity, because that's where the answer is for me, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
That's beautiful.
That's so. I got tingles all over my body hearing you say that. It's really beautiful. And this thing about how even separating something like religion and culture, it's a little difficult sometimes when it makes up an entire person. How do you expect someone to reject this one part of themselves and then accept another? That's fragmented in itself, isn't it? And I did also grow up in a very strong kind of Christian environment in Malaysia, but at the end of the day, and I know we kind of try to avoid talking about religion and these kind of things, but all I can say is God so small? With this sexuality, with this who you love, all this kind of stuff. I don't believe so, personally. And I think that's where it comes
Adding on to that, Jesse, I feel like whatever we believe in, I think the foundation of that is that we should never ever shove that belief in someone else's throat.
Absolutely.
Faith or spirituality or whatever we want to call it should never ever be institutionalized, and it should never be given power, because anything that is given power becomes very dogmatic and it starts to impose. And I have a problem with that too, because I can see why the queer community here has a very strong sense of being
Aversion.
being let down by the faith institutions here, because the faith institutions here have done a lot of damage, a lot of fucking damage.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not holding themselves accountable for what they did, because they were institutionalized and they were given power. So I feel like this is where how my sexual identity and my spirituality and my cultural identity all comes together. I feel like it's my personal journey. I feel like I don't need to, I can share it as a story, but at any point, if I were to turn that and institutionalize that, then I would be erasing other people's story, and I would be expecting everyone else to conform to my way of thinking, and that's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And that moves away from a spiritual practice into a religion, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The spiritual practice is you and God and your own divinity, and religion is when it becomes rules and regulations enforced, and you should never impose someone else's beliefs on.
Absolutely. And even with the concept of God, you know, it's everyone's got a version of it. Everyone's got a version of it. Like, I don't necessarily have to believe in an entity that rules and creates, you know, and you can still be spiritual. You can still believe in humanity.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because I think everybody has a different relationship with, you know, with the Almighty, the God, whoever they want to call it.
Yeah.
Everyone has that different relationship. It's not always the same.
Totally. Yeah.
Now, you were talking about some of the invisible barriers into assimilating into Australian society. What's some of those barriers that you were speaking of?
Where do I start with that one?
Start anyway, honey.
Right, Ash. Seriously. Thank you.
It does feel different if you look, if anyone who doesn't belong to the dominant culture here, if you were to scrutinize it from the day you arrive, or I would say, I'll just speak on behalf of myself, from the day I arrived at the airport, the first time here in Australia, how my name was pronounced, how people had a perception with the passport that I held, how I was treated differently when I went for a job interview, how I had to sanitize myself and try to fit in, whether it was the way I dressed or the way I looked, or how I had to tone my accent down. It was constant gauging and working. And that for me was an indication that there's more to this than under this whole illusion that is created, that it's welcoming and it's inclusive. And I understand that it's still a very new country when it comes to multiculturalism, but I also feel like, no, actually it's not. We've got one of the oldest civilizations in this land. So it also still doesn't make no sense. So there are certain dominant powers that holds that narrative and that holds that system, and you gotta fit into that system, and it doesn't meet you halfway, or doesn't allow you to even meet you halfway. So those are those invisible barriers that I feel like. For example, I had to change my name from Ishwar, the Indian name, to Ash, just so that someone else,
Very difficult.
which is interesting, right? Because
and that helped you get a job easier?
oh, easy. I had to cut my long, surname into a few alphabets and then change this to that and then, slash this and, restructure it so that I fit into the system. But that's just an example.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I couldn't believe that my last name Wong was something that was preventing me from being able to succeed in that area. And I remember when I was trying to find a job, it was like a lot of that. And I was like, they just need to meet me and they'll be able to see me in person. But the fact that we have to do that in the first place, the fact that we have to jump over that in the first place, really, it's quite confronting, and yeah, and I was very lucky in the way that I got it because they had met me in person, or I'd make sure I'd call them, so that they could speak to me on the phone. And it's like that creates almost a bit of shame around yourself, and I'm ashamed that I would even ever say that, but it's like when you're in this environment, and not to be bagging on this country, it's just a reality of like, those barriers that are in place. But I feel
yeah, it's definitely reality.
Yeah,
because I remember working at David Jones, and this girl came in and she said that she's been trying to apply for a job at one of the counters at David Jones, and she's not been successful. But she gave me her resume. And she was Indian. She had a really long first name and surname. And so the counter, I can't remember what the brand was, and she said, can you give it to somebody that looks after? And I said, yeah, of course. So I gave it to the person. They asked me, what does she look like and what does she sound like? I'm like, well, you should just interview her. She looks the part. I think if you do the interview, you make your own judgment. I can't tell you, whether, because they were trying to ask me, does she speak well English? Does she look professional? I shouldn't have said anything, but I just said that she looked the part. But the rest, you need to meet her and judge for yourself. So, I've never had that kind of experience when putting in my resume because of my name. Not Miss Catu, but my legal name is Catalina Clark. So people would assume either because the surname is English, so they'll probably think, oh, she's probably white.
Yeah. And if you didn't pass that resume on, it's likely that she might have not have gotten an opportunity.
Oh, yes, but she got the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, yeah. Speaking of all these barriers, well, not all these barriers, but speaking of those barriers,
some barriers.
Yeah, some barriers. Was there anything that your experience in Malaysia might have helped you sort of tackle this when you came here, or kind of face these challenges? Some of your learnings, or some of your
I think already growing up 5th generation Indian in Malaysia, where there was also systemic racism, not being able to go to uni or any of that stuff. I think that already kind of gave me a foundation on what all that meant. And I think when I came here, I had a whiff of that early on. And that's when I realized, okay, all right, girl, better come to terms with it.
Yeah. And I guess,
but it also, sorry, Jessie.
I guess it's like, well, what I'm getting from that is that you adjusted your expectations, right? Which made you kind of easier to face these challenges. But to be honest, that's not good enough. we shouldn't have to adjust our expectations to expect this so that you can manage it better. That's just not good enough, right? Like, that shouldn't be the answer. And I guess, maybe platforms like this, it's at the end of the day, it's building those relationships, understanding other people's culture, and not here to just bag on what it, obviously we know we're all here. We're all so grateful for being here, and we know the opportunity this has brought us. But I don't know if you can think of practical things that could expand that and change the experience of people of color, so that it's not just maybe ticking a box. I really liked what you said about embracing our way of thinking and a lot of riches there. But any other practical kind of examples that you might be referring to, whether it's workplaces, social places,
See, JC, one of the things that came up to me recently, right? The beauty about growing up in Malaysia, the beauty about it as well, because I do love Malaysia deeply, is because it's so multicultural. Does not matter whether you have an Indian background, Malay background, or Chinese background. We speak more than one language. We speak at least 3 different languages.
I say that to people. You can't only have a conversation in one language. Every conversation includes 3 languages.
Absolutely. And language is always the bridge between one culture to another culture. So when you have a dominant language here, and people only speak one language, of course, the access to that culture or the information that you have to that culture is going to be through that one language. So many context is lost. And I feel like, I feel like hopefully in the next 10, 20 years, by the time the next generation Australians, they know how to speak more than a few languages, because it's beautiful. Language is beautiful. Language connects people. I know so much about Malay culture because I speak Malay in its truest, deepest meaning.
Yeah.
And I'm actually quite surprised, because prior to me migrating here, there was the Lebanese community that migrated here, the Greek community that migrated here, the Italian community that migrated here, but nobody speaks Greek or Lebanese or Italian.
Yeah, I wondered what that is, because maybe slightly different to yours, but growing up, I can't say that I ever, it was there in terms of scholarships and whatnot, but I only really came face to face with racism when I moved here. And I'm not in any way bagging it, but I don't understand. In Malaysia, it is so multicultural, it's like there isn't any kind of, if you have a conversation, it includes all 3 languages, because you can't say some feelings are better described in different languages, right? But also you'd have a Hindu temple, you'd have a mosque, and you have a church literally within 100 meters of each other, and we wouldn't even think twice about it. Or a Buddhist temple,
Yeah.
And I took that for granted. I really did. But I don't understand why. What is it that it makes the segregation here a little bit more apparent?
The segregation is definitely a thing there. It's as simple as living in the south side and living in the north side.
Yeah.
If you're what do you call that? A rich sort of middle class Liberal Party voting person, then automatically people assume you live in the south side. If you're a Greens voter and you're a social justice warrior, then you should be living in Coburg. And I get that a lot. People ask me, what are you doing in the south side? You should be. Why don't you live in Clayton, or why don't you live in Dandenong, or why don't you live in Coburg? And I go, I didn't fucking leave my country to go back into my own bubble. I live where I want to live.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, I know. It's north side, south side, things like that. I think that's also one thing that I have to say, working with the LGBTI community that is so beautiful here that you really don't get in the heterosexual community is community. And it's like, let's say if we had an event, we have so many volunteers that are like dying to help us with an event or something. Outside of that, let's say in the heterosexual community, it's like pulling teeth to try to get someone to help, volunteer their time.
Yeah.
And that's something that was reflected in Malaysia, that sense of community, like just in general. And then even, LGBTI community here, I just want to point out how incredibly valuable and beautiful and important that is.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Especially working at Thorn Harbour Health, I have to say Thorn Harbour Health is probably one of the few organizations that it's got a huge volunteer workforce, and it's nice to see how the LGBT community comes forward every time there's an event.
It really is, yeah. It's so beautiful.
So Ash, do you have any advice on those that are experiencing some of the barriers that you have faced? Like I guess, I don't know if it's advice, but just, is that the right thing to say? Do you have advice? Or I don't know if that's the proper, because I sometimes feel I don't want to give out advice because it might be, I don't know if it's the right or wrong advice. So I just say it.
People can learn from your experience, or like the tools maybe that you utilized and used, and like I like how you said, I want to bring it back to the strength and resilience and not pity party. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
So advice for sure.
Definitely agree with the both of you with the word advice, because I personally have a problem with that, because there's power there, and I don't think anyone 100%, right? And I don't think anyone's lived-in experience is ever the same as somebody else, and I don't think anyone else should be in a position to advise other people, because I personally wouldn't do that. But I have got a few reflections.
Reflections and experiences to share.
Sure. I would say do the right thing for yourself. If you feel that you're too insignificant in number to fight the system, you find a way to leave. Find your own path, and it's no doubt it's difficult, but unfortunately you have to make sacrifices. You will lose people whom you love and you care, and it is a very lonely journey, but I came to realize that I had to live my truth. And finding connections with others who are also in a similar journey. Find a queer elder or a mentor who can guide you and who have fought for their existence. This is something that is lacking in the queer community here. I feel that there's a huge disparity between young queer people and older queer people. And from what I get is that it sounds like, the older queer people are holding on to so much of pain and grief, and they keep circling in that. But actually there's a lot of wisdom there. And that for me is cultural, because in my culture, we always seek guidance
from elders.
From our elders. And we should never ever lose that, because they are precious to us too.
Totally.
And it's sometimes it's good to hear other struggles, because it makes you find your own path. Because I would also say be careful of who you get advice from. Because I received a lot of advice from my straight allies as well, which turned out to be completely heterosexist in the end. Because people will say things because they care for you, but they don't live your life. Therefore, only view you through the lens of their world.
Yeah.
And you got to trust yourself. I would say, another thing I would say, and this is really powerful, this is a trans woman that I know who was with me when I was in my early days of discovering my sexuality, and she's no longer around because she died of AIDS. And she said, the moment you know you're queer, you become a soldier. And the sooner you come to terms with that, the quicker you will survive. Our battle never ends, neither does the fight.
Mhm. That's beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah. And that's how I feel.
yeah.
Thanks.
So those are really wise words.
That is like I just need a moment. Yeah. That really, yeah. Thank you for sharing those. It's really powerful, Ash. Yeah. Wow.
See, I said from the beginning, you're so inspiring.
Mm,
Like, yeah.
mm,
And then here you are, you just proven it even more.
yeah. Yeah.
I think it's because of the both of you.
No,
No,
thank you.
it's both of you.
You two have some magic.
I'll take any credit.
I'm really proud of you. And I just want to reiterate that sentiment that you have about elders, you know, it's something my heart really feels very, very dearly and strongly about respecting our elders, you know, and coming here a lot of the time, like I'm so lucky, like my parents managed to move here a few years ago, but whenever I'm out with my dad, right, like I dote on him and I take care of him as you do, like it doesn't, you don't think twice. And we always get comments about, my goodness, your daughter is so good to you. She takes such good care of you. And to us, we're just like, what else are you gonna do? Like, isn't it normal? It's just like that love and that respect. I appreciate the sentiment that the both of you have and the understanding what that truly means of respecting your elders. It doesn't mean just holding the door for them. It doesn't mean just taking care of them. There's a completely, it's a different level of understanding that you can't explain in words.
Mm.
And yeah, I recognize and I appreciate that. And I know a lot of people watching will too.
Totally, Jesse. But like, just adding on something important as well. I said earlier that I did leave my family and my loved ones in Malaysia, and I came here with my ex-partner.
Yeah.
But I'm not out of touch with them. I call my mom almost every day.
Nice.
If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be in this world.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, if it wasn't for my sisters, I wouldn't be here. You know, the women in my family, they are special. You know, just because there's one aspect of my sexuality does not mean that I have to cut my ties with them, because they are all part of me, and so are all the queer people in our community. They hold so much wisdom, so much resilience, so much stories, and all that we have to listen to that. You know, we have to, because there's lots of lessons to be learned there. We cannot make sure that mistakes are repeated again.
Yeah.
That's true.
Let's make life a bit easier by, like, you know, learning as much as we can, gaining as much of that, and then living our path, you know, because life is short. We might as well be living our truth.
Yes.
And we could talk for hours and hours more, but I think we might draw to close soon. Just before we do, any last words from either of you for our lovely audience?
I just want to say thank you, Jessie. Thank you, Thorn Harbour. And thank you, Ash, for coming on. You've been so inspirational.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we get to hear your story, and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Catalina. I just, both Jesse and you, both your vibe just somehow magically opened up I got to open up, because whatever that I speak, I don't usually speak about.
Yeah.
And I'm usually quite careful with what I say, because I don't want it to turn into a pity party.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a lot of love, and there's a lot of empathy, and there's a lot of connection here, and I think that definitely facilitated a very beautiful conversation around culture, food, I mean, can you believe this actually started with food?
Yeah, I know. That's
And
I'm really
and thank you, Thorn Harbour Health, as well, because I think this is a brilliant initiative. This is one of those things that I feel like is going to build that bridge between queer people of color and the mainstream
Yes.
queer community.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
well. Thank goodness I love food, right? And I was like, let's bring that in. And yeah, who knew that this idea would blow up to be so massive, and had such amazing support from my manager and director and all that cast to help me pull this off. I mean, I've never filmed a series before, right? But I think we pulled it off.
Well,
No, you did.
it might turn into a roadshow, maybe.
Oh,
And their interview, what is it called, a masterclass? Is that what it's called?
oh, the mock
That-
interview.
Oh yeah, the mock interview. That part plays a really important part in the whole episode. It's a really important part that we have that. Because if you were to separate it from the cooking, if you were to do it during the cooking, it kind of gets lost. So I love how you did that. There's the cooking part and then there's the interview.
Yeah, I know.
So just the ending's going forever.
That's okay. Well, people have watched. It's been good content. That was those were powerful because I was leading those interviews, and I remember I think I completely unprofessionally teared up when I was talking to you, Ash, right behind the camera, and I was like, "It's okay, just look at me, look in my eyes, and like, I got you." And you did so well. Everyone did so well, but we can see that strength, the courage, and the realness of it. I'm in awe. I really am, and I'm so proud of you. Yeah. And for those of you watching, there is going to be another project coming out soon that is going to actually focus on those interview sections, because there is so much good content there that we only used a little bit. So you can stay tuned for that, but I'm not going to say too much about that yet. Thank you so much, Ash. Thank you so much, Miss Catalina. It's been an absolute pleasure
Thank you, Jessie.
to have you on. And for
Thank you,
those of
Jessie.
you watching, thank you. There is more information on thornharbour.org/the Bent Spoon. And we'll see you next week for an episode.
Yes.
Today.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Catalina. Bye, Jessie.
Bye.
Bye, Ash.